My name is Ava Curry. I'm a senior in civil engineering with a minor in environmental politics and policy, as well as political science. Today I'm going to be talking about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So first and foremost, what is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act? So you may have more commonly heard this as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Deal or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. There's a number of different names for all the same thing. But what this is it is an act that has provided funding towards infrastructure in America, specifically $1.2 trillion towards America's infrastructure. This is mainly focusing on heavy civil and utilities work. So heavy civil is going to be your roads, your bridges, dams, anything that's not a vertical skyscraper and that a lot of people would be using on their day-to-day lives. It's specifically focusing on sustainable rehabilitation and reclamation. So that's not only building new sustainable infrastructure, but also making sure that the existing infrastructure in the United States that's worked on can have money put towards it and make sure that it's sustainable for long-term use. This also goes to job funding for the infrastructure sector. So this is both staff and craft and making sure that those funds are available moving towards the future of American infrastructure. So the first clip I'm going to show y'all is a clip from President Biden kind of talking about the work that he's done with this act.
We're finally doing something about it. We're finally getting it done. We're turning Infrastructure Weekend from a punchline with my predecessor into an infrastructure decade on our watch. Last year, I signed a law, a once-in-a-generation investment in our nation's roads, highways, bridges, railroads, ports, airports, water systems, high-speed internet, etc.
Perfect. I wanted to highlight the importance of this being an act versus an agreement. This is one of the first very, very large, significant acts towards American infrastructure. So an act is more of a binding piece of legislation, and it also oftentimes provides funding. This is different from an agreement. An agreement is more guidelines and frameworks. One of the most significant agreements right now is the Paris Climate Agreement, and that's a group of countries that have come together and committed to reducing carbon emissions and lowering global warming, but that's a commitment. That's a guideline that's saying, hey guys, we should make sure that we stay under this level. That isn't like, okay, here's the funding for it, here's how we're gonna do it. It's not as quantifiable as an act is, and that kind of shows the significance of this Infrastructure Act. So why is this important? Why is it so significant that this is an act? So the American Society of Civil Engineers has consistently ranked American infrastructure at a D or below rating. And so that's very much like an ABC scale, so that would be a failing grade. In the past couple of years, it has moved up to a C, but overall, the American infrastructure is considered failing, both literally and figuratively. This picture here is of the I-35 bridge collapse in northern Minnesota, which I think many of y'all probably remember, but it really shows, where this money is coming from and where it's going. The last large, giant federal act was the Federal Highways Act of 1956, which Eisenhower passed, and that was what established the interstate system. So since the start of the interstate system, there hasn't been any giant federal act of funding to help it. And so a lot of the infrastructure was built in the 1940s and 50s, coming right off World War II. And this meant that most of the infrastructure in America is the same age as your grandparents, and that it's, definitely getting up there in its lifespan. It was built to last for 30, 50 years, not to last for 75. But outside of just bridges and roads, this also is for utilities. So this next clip here is from a representative of Michigan talking about the Flint, Michigan water crisis.
Sort of reframe and reset how the market works. And then we can roll up our sleeves and go to bat and grow small businesses, but we can't do it with infrastructure that's falling apart.
To Pennsylvania, Rhett is an independent. Good morning.
One of the most significant failures of utility infrastructure was the Flint, Michigan water crisis. Kind of the long and short of the engineering of what happened is they tried to change an aging system. They tried to change a system that was built in the 40s and 50s, and it led to the corroding of pipes and the pipes being destroyed by the Flint River, which led to unusable water, unpotable water that was at 3 times the lead limit. From the political side of this, the citizens of Flint turned around and went after the government saying, hey, we want our water to be clear, we want it to be clean, which is very, very reasonable. And a federal judge ended up ordering the city had to provide water for the citizens of Flint. Additionally, Congress had to come in and provide additional lead testing and CDC testing for the city of Flint. So the price tag of this is extremely steep. To fix the pipes themselves, so this is an emergency fix, was $1.5 billion. That is very much a pretty penny, but on top of that, there was over $625 million put towards legal expenses and lawsuits and making sure that the people of Flint could get back to a normal way of life. So not only did this have an actual infrastructure cost, it also had a policy cost that went with it. So this really kind of highlights the importance of the Infrastructure Act. With this act, we're able to get in front of the aging infrastructure in the United States and work proactively to make sure that it is good and doesn't end up failing on us, and making sure that there's inspections and the work is there and that there are workers there to make sure that the Infrastructure for America continues to thrive. So there are my references, and does anybody have any questions?